I ran for office to ensure that our community has a voice in Washington. We were sick of the division, sick of the political games, and sick of our elected officials making special interests the priority over us. That's why one of my main priorities, both then and now, has been bringing more transparency and accountability to our government. And that's why today I want to explain to you what's happening with the Mueller Report, how we got here, why it matters, and what's next. On Thursday, Bob Mueller's report on the investigation into President Trump was made public. And since then, there's been a lot of confusion, partisan spin, and punditry. It's not helpful, especially with something this serious. So I wanted to walk it back and talk through the details. The Mueller Report is a two-parter. The first part is about criminal conspiracy, which you've heard most often called collusion. And the second part is about obstruction of justice. Long story short, Russia interfered. According to the report, they did so in a sweeping and systematic fashion. There's very clear evidence of this. Starting in 2014, Russia decided to weaponize social media. They sent spies to the United States to gather intelligence and launched fake social media accounts with the intent to cause division and doubt in our political system through what it called information warfare. Tens of millions of Americans were reached through what started as a campaign to undermine US elections and evolved into a targeted operation that favored Trump and disparaged Clinton. The Russian government also employed a second form of interference known as cyber intrusions. Through this, they hacked hundreds of thousands of emails and documents and dumped them online with the same purpose, all to tilt the 2016 election in favor of their preferred candidate, Donald Trump. These attacks by Russia on our democracy to try and get Trump elected coincided with a series of contacts between Trump campaign officials and individuals with ties to the Russian government. Mueller investigated these contacts to find out if Russia and the Trump campaign actively conspired or coordinated with each other to interfere with the election. Here are some of the events that were investigated to see if there was a criminal conspiracy. First, Trump was pursuing a deal to build a Trump Tower in Russia, even into 2016, and then said over and over that he wasn't. Then, the famous Trump Tower meeting happened. The meeting was initiated by the Russians in an attempt to give the Trump campaign dirt they said they had on Hillary Clinton. Later, Trump publicly called on Russia to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, and within just hours, they did so. Additionally, many on the Trump campaign and in his administration have long-standing relationships with Russian officials and have been charged with crimes related to those relationships. So what Mueller found was that the Russian government believed it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked very hard to secure that outcome. At the same time, the Trump campaign expected that it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts. However, the Mueller investigation did not establish enough evidence to determine that the Trump campaign directly coordinated or conspired with Russia to interfere in the election, merely that the campaign was a willing beneficiary. So when you hear that there was, quote, no collusion, don't misunderstand that. The report showed that the two parties were informed by and responsive to each other's actions and interests, but there wasn't an actual agreement as far as coordination on election interference. This is a legal technicality, but does not have any bearing on what's right or wrong. The report ultimately shows that the campaign willingly accepted aid from a known foreign enemy to win an election and then went to great lengths to lie about it. So that's not enough to convict people on conspiracy, but to me, it is still absolutely and fundamentally wrong. It's up to you to decide if you feel the same way. The second part of the report is on obstruction-related events, which is basically when you do something that tries to get in the way of an official proceeding within the justice system. This could be intimidating witnesses, hiding evidence, lying, and so forth. The report actually outlines 11 possible cases where Trump did just that. Here are some. Trump publicly insisted that Russia did not influence the 2016 election and denied having business deals in Russia, both of which are lies. Trump also tried to get the FBI director to drop an investigation into his national security advisor, who, by the way, is now a convicted felon. Trump fired the FBI director when he wouldn't publicly say that Trump himself wasn't under investigation, which was Trump asking the FBI director to lie. Trump directed his White House lawyer to have Bob Mueller fired because Trump said it would be the end of his presidency if Mueller carried out the investigation. Later, Trump then asked the same White House lawyer to call the New York Times to deny that any of this ever happened and was angry that his lawyer gave information to the investigators. Trump asked his campaign manager to tell the Attorney General to make a public statement that the investigation was very unfair and that the president had did nothing wrong. Trump tried to prevent emails from being made public that showed Donald Trump Jr. did in fact meet with a Russian lawyer at Trump Tower. Finally, Trump and his legal team urged key figures in the probe not to give information to investigators and attacked those who did provide helpful information. So here's where it gets a bit tricky. Justice Department policy dictates that Mueller is unable to officially charge the president with obstruction. This makes sense if you think about it. The Justice Department is part of the executive branch, which the president oversees. So the executive branch can't be a check on itself. That's why we have the separation of powers in the Constitution. And it's the role of Congress to provide those checks and balances on the executive branch. However, the investigation was able to lay out all the facts in the context of if they were to make obstruction charges. This is where you get a confusing statement in the form of a double negative. If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment. Basically, they're saying we can't charge him with obstruction because legally we're not allowed to, but based on the facts, we can't say that he's innocent. The report goes on to make two other key statements. With respect to whether the president can be found to have obstructed justice, we concluded that Congress has the authority to prohibit a president's corrupt use of his authority in order to protect the integrity of the administration of justice. Second, the conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction laws to the president's corrupt exercise of the powers of office accords with our constitutional system of checks and balances and the principle, and this is important, that no person is above the law. In other words, the special counsel cannot charge the president with obstruction, but if they were to do so, they say that here is the case they would make on 11 different counts. So now they're saying, Congress, it's up to you. Our Constitution makes it very clear that it's Congress's job to investigate and hold accountable the executive branch of government. That's what checks and balances are for. I take very seriously my responsibility to protect and serve the American people and uphold the Constitution. And frankly, anytime anyone, whether Democrat or Republican or the president of this country, puts our national security at risk, it is the job of Congress to hold that person accountable. The safety and security of our nation is my only concern here, and it is clear that it has been and is at risk, and indeed that we've been attacked at the highest levels by one of our most dangerous adversaries. Congress is currently exploring our next steps. All options that the Constitution makes available have to be considered. Please know that as we continue to work to ensure that anyone who engaged in misconduct that puts the American people at risk are held accountable, our other work to provide affordable housing, access to health care, and support for our veterans and military families will also continue. Our government will not stop working for our community, but our work also includes continuing on in search of the truth. As the report so clearly states, the work of the special counsel is now over, and it is the duty of Congress to continue.